Yeah, I mean, I like trophies and stuff like that. But the more important thing is now, how come private schools who do not have these standardized tests, why do their children either seem to do better or, or I don't know if they like school better, but they seem to, the issue is a lot of kids go to public school and they turn out a certain way. A lot of kids go to private school and they turn out a certain way.
You're hitting on environment versus there, right?
People ain't gonna like where we're gonna go with this.
That's strictly environment.
Carlton, you want this or you want me to take this?
I can afford private school, so I'm going to send him to private school. If I can't afford private school, how am I going to send him to private school? Unless he gets a scholarship or he recruited to go there, why is he going there?
Right.
He's going to a public education, and things will be free, paid for. I don't have to worry about that.
The other thing to piggyback on Carlton's point is folks that can afford private school are more likely to be people who have enough control over their children to control their behavior.
I wouldn't say that totally.
I
would agree with you about 85%.
Well, I mean, we can semantics with the percentages, but if you look at private school, I would venture to say that the instances of disciplinary problems are lower than they would be in public schools. Keeping in mind, people who got money to send their kid to school also got the wherewithal to look their kid in the eye and say, if you cut up, I'm going to bust your ass right now.
And also,
opposed to people in the public school, we talking about the 28-year-old mom who has the high schooler.
You have better parental support in the private sector.
But that goes to what I'm saying. Yeah. So you're agreeing with me. Wow.
However, I would say this, full disclosure, I don't have any kids. I went to public school, and I didn't have an issue with public school, and that was a couple years ago, But I guess the question
Did he say a couple years ago?
Yeah, but the question is, what's so popular about private schools that we can't mimic that in public schools and get the same education?
Teacher-student ratio.
Well, and I was just going to say, again, that goes back to your parenting. You have to set, whether it's private school or public school, this is acceptable in my house and this is not.
Yeah.
But, there's something I used to do as a single parent. My son is now 13. I never wanted him to see the times when, I had financial, struggling financially, because I didn't want him to feel like he was a burden. I just wanted his life to be happy.
Yeah.
But one day, my adopted mom said to me, she said, you're teaching him that life is always good and it's easy, and you have to stop doing that. And my son is 13. We talk about credit. He asked me about checks and working. He wants to start working when he's 14, to help pay bills. Not that I'm putting that responsibility on him, but he knows he likes to shop. You got to make that money to be able to shop.
Yep.
Can he come to my house if he wants to pay bills? I'm just asking. Asking.
I applaud, him for doing that, because that's a rarity, and that speaks to your skill as a parent, and we applaud you for being that kind of parent. I think, to kind of speak on the point that Carlton and I were making a little while ago, people who have the wherewithal to send their kid to private school, you would think, in theory, that they would have the responsibility to go along with the finances to be able to maintain a level of decorum in the classroom. And if they didn't have it, they would be able to regulate, so to speak. Whereas some in private schools, they got to take the kids in the district. They have to. Public schools. And the kids that wild out, they send them to another public school for kids who wild out.
Yep.
So you still taking them. So you may have more instances. Now, if you got good kids like Big Rube was, I went to public school and private school. I was a hybrid. I went to both. And I would venture to say I was a good kid. And I remember those kids that wilded out, and they were disruptive. And even though I wasn't always happy to be there, it did annoy me sometimes when they would wild out, because it would slow down the progress in the classroom. So you may have some kids who don't want to be there because they know that when they get there, Craig and them going to wild out as soon as they get to homeroom.
Understand.
So that might be part of it as well.
Okay. And Mama J wants to say something?
Mama J, you got a comment you want to add?
I thought about it, and I know why I like school.
All right. Well, so what's the deal? Why you like school?
Because of all the people there and teachers and people like that are good people.
You enjoy it. You just enjoy seeing the good people when you go to school every day, and it makes you feel good. And there you go. I think that even as a grown person, she's 9 years old, she has the the analysis to know that she wants to be where there's good people.
Okay.
And whether that be in public school or private school, doesn't matter. If it's good people here, I'm good. And that's the reason why you got some public schools that do well, and some that don't do well. We got to call a big Rube. We want to screen that. We'll go ahead and move on until we can figure out who that is calling us up. But Tony, I'll ask you this. I know that you had mentioned that your son wants to help out. Do you think that it's because of what he sees with you, or does he have issues with regards to school and how he feels about being there? Or what is your thought on how those two things correlate with each other?
Oh, no. I mean, I know that it's because of the way that I've raised him. I mean, that's something he's been saying since he was like 5 years old, that he would want to get money in some kind of way to help me and help everybody who's homeless. That's just who he is and how he was raised.
Right.
He's going to 8th grade this year,
right.
And 7th grade was a bit of a challenge. He's always been honor roll, but 7th grade was just different.
Right.
And I've noticed, middle school, they don't coddle them like they do in elementary school. In elementary, you have one teacher for the most part. They know you know them, you're comfortable with them. But in middle school, it's like a factory. Get them in, teach them, and get them out.
Right.
So, not having that special attention, kids can feel lost in that. Right. So, he went through, the transition, getting F's and things like that. But what really woke him up was, seeing those F's on his report card,
right.
And knowing that this is because I did this. Nobody gave this to me. Nobody did this to me. This is on me, and I know I can do better.
Right.
So I have to.
Week after week on Ain't No Half Steppin' Marcus J, we got a listener who assists us, sends us stats, sends us emails, things of that sort. And we finally got him to call in on a subject. We got Hakeem on the line. What's up, brother?
Not much, man. What's going on?
I'm done. Not much, man. Glad to hear your voice, man. Thanks for calling us. Ain't No Half Steppin' Marcus J. What you want to get in on?
I just want to stir the pot a little bit, or switch how y'all going about this subject here about public schools and private schools. Let's look at it from a different angle.
Okay.
Let's say public schools are factories. Everything, this whole system is systemic. Public schools are factories. So they're churning out children who are going to be low-skilled laborers. And you got the private schools, for the elite people who are going to own the companies. And that's what they produce. They producing the people who are going to be the future entrepreneurs, the future elite class of this country. And you just got the public schools who are just producing people who are going to work for them, or who are just going to fall into the cracks and become, the drug addicts or the people who are constantly going in and out of jail or whatever. Then what about looking at it from that angle?
Well, that's a very interesting angle. I think that there's definitely something to it, because if you look at the way they're building prisons and things of that sort now, they're looking at 8, 9. I mean, my daughter's 9. She's in the room with us. They're looking at 8, 9-year-old little boys, and they're looking at test scores at 8 and 9-year-old little boys to determine how many prisons they're going to need in 20 years. They're building prisons now, and they're telling the private companies that are building these prisons that they expect to have full capacity in 20 years. So how the hell would they know that? You know what I mean? Like, how would they know that? So that's a good point that you bring up, Hawk, because, if you look at the private schools, if you look at the scores, potentially these are the people that's filling up the Ivy League schools, filling up Harvard and filling up Yale and places like that. And some of the public schools, I don't have numbers in front of me, so I'm going off a field, but I would venture to say that you probably have in some districts very high graduation rates, but in other districts very low graduation rates.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I feel like the standardized testing in the public schools is a farce, because when you're tested 7 to 8 times from kindergarten to 12th grade, you graduate. Let's just be honest. I can't tell you the square root of 322 right now without thinking about it, but in high school I could do a little better. But going through all these testings, it's almost like it's brainwashing us for brainwashing them for, like you said, the plants, the factories. I mean, they come out low-skill labelers because they can barely count 10 plus 10 or 3 plus 3 or 3 times 3 instead of being just like, look, I know how to do this because I actually did this. And to me, that's the problem in the public school sector because, you know, you can't get teachers because you don't want to pay for it because you're too busy to build prisons. And that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and I have to say, too, on the flip...
I think it's kind of foolish or naive, let's say naive, to think that, like you said, we can calculate from the reading and the math scores of our kids in the 3rd grade to know how many prisons we're going to need. It's foolish, it's naive to think that we know these statistics, how many prisons we're going to need. For years and decades, we've been using these studies, these statistics, or whatever. It's foolish to think, naive to think that we can't find a way to solve our education crisis, but we can find a way to constantly keep the prison system going.
Big Rube?
It's just naive. We're too intelligent for that. You know, we got a rover on Mars right now, and we can't fix our education crisis. Being gullible about it.
Well, you know, we don't want to. You know, we can go there, Hawk, because I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I really don't think they want to fix it because there's too much money in prisons. And
prison is a big business.
Prison is big business. And like I said a few minutes ago, there's money in... Let me back up. When they test the 8 and 9-year-olds to see how they're going to test to figure out how many of them are going to be in prison in 20 years, there's no precedent for it. You know, there's no precedent for them to want to go ahead and continue educating. And you would think that they would go ahead and do that because these are the same kids, instead of sending them to prison with the free labor so that they could, you know, do what they do in prison. Instead of doing that, these same kids could potentially be the entrepreneurs who are building businesses, who are making money, who are hiring your children and my children. You know, so it's a calculated gamble. Do we decide to continue educating them so that they could be those entrepreneurs? Or do we want to leave them as they are and see what happens and potentially have them be our future inmates? I think that if you look at the way things are going now, I think we can kind of see where it's going. I mean, again, as I mentioned, they're testing kids. They're testing kids to see how many prisons they need. When I did the knowledge and I figured that out, it blew my mind, Hawk. It blew my mind. Now, I guess I should have knew it because I don't necessarily trust government. I don't necessarily trust administration. You know, I'm a conspiracy theorist, like these cats who like to try to call me in here. I don't think. Admit it. Well, I am. You know, and I think that people who aren't are naive, like Doc just said. I think if you don't take the time to study what people do, and if you walk around assuming that people have your best interest at hand, the way the world is now, you assume just because you pay your taxes that your money's going in the right place. You assume just because you're going to go send your kid to school that they're going to get taught. You assuming all of that. You're the fool. You got to make sure that you do what you got to do to make sure your kid get what you got to get. Now, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in there. I'm going to have you comment on this one, and then I'm going to let you go. Desiree hits us up. She joined the show a couple of weeks ago. She hits us up, and she says, I think homeschool have it better over all the children. That's an angle that we haven't even talked about. Hawk, I'm going to get your opinion on that one first, and then we're going to let you go.
I think if a parent is well schooled enough and intelligent enough to properly educate their child at home, then I'm all for it. But a lot of us, we come through the same system, the same educational system. That's a problem today. And so unless we could transcend those problems on our own, then we shouldn't be educating our children. But if we do, then we can educate our children at home.
Good deal.
But unless we find a way to transcend those problems that are systemic, that have been here in our educational system for generations, and we're just going to pass on the same character traits that leave us exactly where we are today. And that's what we're trying to get over. So if a parent is well schooled enough and educated and intelligent enough to produce productive and intelligent children, then I'm all for it.
Good deal, Hawk. I appreciate it, man. I know we talked before. You said you would get in. You got in. You are welcome anytime you want to get in on Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J. We appreciate your support week after week. And we appreciate you calling in and talking to us. The crew got to finally hear what you sound like, bro.
Thanks a lot. I love you guys.
All right, man. Thank you. Thank you for calling, Hawk. We're going to get with you next time.
All right, cool. Take it easy.
Call Banks.
You know, I take in consideration he said he's all in favor of homeschooling kids, but then you don't get them socially rounded when you do that. You have them so isolated that they can't experience anything. They can't adapt to changes outside of what's going on in the home. Those kids are not going to be socially developed as the rest of us are. I'm not, when I'm saying socially developed, I mean, oh, we got another call. Did I knock somebody off that block? I mean, I must have pissed somebody off. But the thing is, being socially developed actually helps you learn better. Now, if you're going to just leave them in the home like that, they're not going to get that interaction that they would with other people, and then contradict what's being taught to them. They need that. Kids need that. So,
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, you know, as working adults, you know, I think most of us in the room have a good idea that probably a good 80% of your ability to succeed in life comes from your ability to work with and tolerate other people. I wanted to kind of jump back to, you know, Big Ruben mentioned earlier about, you know, the private schools and kids who go to private schools, you know, they tend to produce better grades or maybe get into better colleges. But you have to look at, is that a true indication of their performance, or is it a factor of maybe their parents can buy their education?
We got a caller on the line, caller that's very, very close to my heart and close to Mama J's heart. We got Mrs. J on the line. What's up, baby?
Hello, love.
How you doing?
Y'all are destroying public school.
I'm not.
You have to throw
Me
this
either.
out. And this is why. So when you look at public school and you look at like how the U.S. is compared to other countries and whatnot, people always seem to forget that the U.S. is one of the few places where it's mandatory to educate every child. Now, if we went to public school systems which aren't fully public, like in other places, where we could say, oh, you know what, you're going to be a farmer, and you're going to be a technician, and you're going to be this, and I'm only going to educate these people, and these people are the ones who are currently in the public schools, because those are the ones whose parents do everything they can to get them out of the regular society, then we wouldn't be having this discussion. But we don't have that system. We have a system where, yes, we make it a point to go and try to educate all. But in trying to do that, you have to recognize that there are going to be those parents who don't care, who send those students to school who don't care. And thus, you can't teach at the higher level that you want to teach at, because you're stuck with all of these people who don't care to be in the system, but you're forced to keep them in the system, because unlike a private school, you can't make the parents sign a contract to say, hey, you know what, if your child is going to do what they need to do, they're going to be kicked out. So that's the issue that we have. And that's the reason why you see these problems that keep going over and over as the years go over and over in public education. Because we set up a system where it's like, oh, everybody can be educated, but when you set that system up, no, everybody can't be educated.
You know, that's a good point. None of us have really considered, you know, and it takes an educator. It takes an educator to call us up and tell us, you know, that sort of thing. Tony, you wanted to add something?
Absolutely. And I was thinking this, but, you know, there is, you know, the requirement, you know, we have, our children have to go to school, they have to be educated, but we don't have the same standards across the board. For private schools, it's, you know, one standard. For public schools, it's another standard. If you look at countries like China, or a lot of the Asian countries, India, it's not acceptable for anyone to not exceed and do well. Those children, you know, some people may think that they're kind of hard on them, but, you know, they're all instilled with the same value, that same drive that, you know what, I have to be the absolute best at what I do. Yes, sometimes it may be a bit too much, but, you know, we don't have that.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Tony. And what people don't know is that people in other countries, they have a standardized test when the kids are in elementary, too, that determines whether or not they get to continue on into the middle schools and the high schools, because we have a lot of transfer student teachers and students that come over that say they came to America. They didn't have a high enough test score to say in their own country, so they come here. And our private schools also give the SOLs when they want state accreditation. Those kids are taking the test as well. But you don't hear any issues about, oh, those teachers are teaching to the test, because those kids are teaching at getting taught at a higher level, because they are the kids who have been screened and said, hey, you can do better.
Thank you for calling us up, baby. We're going to see you in about an hour and a half. We're going to get home.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks for bringing the intelligence to it and schooling us on what we didn't know. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. That was Mrs. J. The first time the listeners got an opportunity to listen to the voice of reason that I got to go home to and listen to night after night. But we love her. We appreciate it. Ain't no half stepping Marcus J. We're gonna leave it there. We come back. We'll get into our rants and our closes. No diggity, no doubt.
Yo, Dre, drop the verse. It's going down, fade to Black Street. The homies got at me, collab creations, bump like agony.